We live in an era of infinite choice. Thousands of career paths, hundreds of online courses, countless ways to build a life. We have access to more information, more reviews, more data than any generation in history. We can research every possible angle, compare every option, analyze every outcome. And paradoxically, we have never been more paralyzed. This growing inability to commit affects millions of people around the world. It's often labeled as indecisiveness, perfectionism, or even analysis paralysis. But what if this conclusion is wrong? What if the problem isn't that you can't decide, but that you've been conditioned to believe that certainty is possible? What if your paralysis isn't weakness, but the result of trying to solve an unsolvable equation? This is exactly what one Danish philosopher understood over 150 years ago, long before the internet multiplied our options into infinity. Søren Kierkegaard lived through his own crisis of endless possibility. He was a man who spent years wrestling with fundamental life choices: faith, love, career, and he watched himself become trapped by his own brilliant analytical mind. Through his own struggle, Kierkegaard came to a radical conclusion. The most important decisions in life cannot be made through logic alone. There comes a moment when analysis ends and living begins. He called this moment the leap of faith, not religious faith necessarily, but the courage to act without complete certainty. This insight reveals a disturbing truth about our current reality. If meaningful choice requires accepting uncertainty, what happens to a generation that has been promised that perfect information exists? What happens when we mistake infinite research for infinite wisdom? What happens to the human soul when every decision becomes a data problem to be solved? This brings us to a radical reflection. Perhaps you are not indecisive. Perhaps you are afraid to live. Afraid of making the wrong choice. Afraid of closing off other possibilities. Afraid of discovering who you really are when you stop hiding behind endless research. Your inability to choose is not a character flaw. It's a symptom, a warning that something essential about human existence has been lost in our quest for perfect certainty. And this is exactly what we will explore. How the illusion of perfect choice has created a generation of perfectly paralyzed people. How anxiety disguised as thoroughness is stealing years of your life. And how a 19th century philosopher who nearly chose himself into oblivion can teach us to leap again. If you have ever found yourself researching the same decision for months, if you've ever felt like you're living in a waiting room of your own life, this message is for you. Because perhaps your problem isn't lack of information. Perhaps it's lack of courage. The modern human has been sold a beautiful lie. The lie that, with enough research, enough analysis, enough comparison shopping, we can find the perfect path, the optimal career, the ideal relationship, the flawless life plan. This promise has transformed decision-making from an act of courage into an exercise in data collection. We don't choose based on intuition, values, or authentic desire anymore. We choose based on spreadsheets, pros and cons lists, 5-star ratings from strangers. But here's the devastating truth. Perfect information doesn't exist. Perfect certainty is an illusion. And the pursuit of both is stealing your life. Think about your last major decision. How many hours did you spend researching? How many articles did you read? How many people did you ask? How many scenarios did you run through your head? Now ask yourself, at what point did more information actually make the decision easier? The answer, for most people, is never. In fact, the opposite happened. The more you researched, the more complex the decision became. The more options you discovered, the more paralyzed you felt. What psychologists call the paradox of choice isn't just academic theory. It's the lived reality of millions of people drowning in possibility. And there's a reason for this. Your brain wasn't designed for infinite options. In thousands of years of human evolution, our ancestors faced limited choices. Hunt this animal or that one. Marry within this small tribe. Stay or migrate with the seasons. The scope of possibility was bounded by physical reality. But now, every choice feels infinite. Where to live, anywhere with an internet connection. What to study, Thousands of degrees and certifications. Who to date? Millions of profiles on apps. What career to pursue? Industries that didn't exist 5 years ago. Your brain, still operating with ancient software, responds to infinite choice the same way it responds to mortal danger. Fight, flight, or freeze. And for most people facing major life decisions, freeze wins. This is the trap we've built for ourselves. You think more research will reduce anxiety, but it actually increases it. You think more options will increase freedom, but they create a prison. You think you're being careful, but you're actually being cowardly. Because what you're really avoiding isn't making the wrong choice. You're avoiding the fundamental human condition that Kierkegaard understood with surgical precision. To live means to choose without certainty. To be human means to act without complete information. And when you refuse this condition, you don't eliminate risk. You guarantee the worst outcome of all, the slow death of a life unlived. So what happens to a person who turns every life decision into a research project? What happens when you treat your existence like a consumer purchase that can be optimized through better data? The answer is devastating. You become a prisoner of your own intelligence. The overthinking mind doesn't analyze to understand. It analyzes to avoid. Every new piece of information becomes another reason to delay. Every possibility becomes another source of anxiety. Every choice becomes a referendum on your entire future. This isn't wisdom. This is paralysis, disguised as diligence. The person trapped in endless analysis loses touch with their own desires. After reading hundreds of career guides, they no longer remember what actually interests them. After comparing every option, they no longer trust their own judgment. After researching every angle, they become afraid of their own intuition. Here's the cruelest irony. In trying to make the perfect choice, you lose the ability to make any choice at all. Your authentic voice gets drowned out by the noise of external opinions. Your inner compass gets scrambled by too much data. You become what Kierkegaard called the aesthetic, someone who lives in the realm of pure possibility, sampling everything, committing to nothing, always researching, never deciding, always preparing, never acting, always considering, never living. The aesthetic person believes they are keeping their options open, but they are actually choosing the worst option of all, the option of no option. They think they are being sophisticated, but they are being cowardly. They think they are being careful, but they are being wasteful with the one resource that cannot be recovered: time. Years pass this way. Relationships are never fully entered. Careers are never fully explored. Dreams are never fully pursued. All in the name of finding something better, something more certain, something more perfect. But perfection doesn't exist. And while you're looking for it, your actual life is passing you by. The Danish word that Kierkegaard used for this state was angst. Not just anxiety, but the specific anxiety that comes from confronting your own freedom. The vertigo you feel when you realize that you must choose, that no one else can choose for you, and that every choice involves the risk of error. This angst is not a bug in the human system. It's a feature. It's the price of freedom. It's the cost of being human. But our culture has taught us to avoid this angst at all costs. We've been told that with enough planning, enough research, enough optimization, we can eliminate uncertainty from our lives. This is not just false, it's destructive. Because when you refuse to face the fundamental uncertainty of existence, you don't eliminate anxiety. You amplify it. You don't reduce risk. You guarantee failure. As Kierkegaard wrote, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. But how can you be who you are if you never choose who to become? To understand how Kierkegaard arrived at this insight, we need to go back to 1843. A young Danish philosopher sat in a coffee house in Copenhagen, wrestling with a decision that had paralyzed him for years. Should he marry his fiancée Regina, or break off the engagement to pursue his calling as a writer and thinker? Søren Kierkegaard had analyzed every angle. He loved Regina deeply, but feared that marriage would compromise his philosophical mission. He wanted companionship, but worried about the responsibility. He craved normalcy, but knew he was called to something different. For months, he researched, he consulted, he agonized. He created elaborate philosophical frameworks to justify either choice. But the more he analyzed, the more trapped he became. Neither option could be proven correct through reason alone. And then Kierkegaard had a breakthrough that would change philosophy forever. He realized that the most important decisions in life cannot be made through logic alone. They require what he called a leap of faith. Not blind faith, but the courage to act when analysis reaches its limit. This leap is not anti-intellectual, it's post-intellectual. It acknowledges that reason can take you to the edge of decision, but it cannot push you over. At some point, you must jump. Kierkegaard broke off his engagement. It was a decision that haunted him for the rest of his life, but it was also the decision that freed him to become one of the most influential philosophers in history. He chose uncertainty over paralysis, action over endless analysis, living over preparing to live. This is the paradox that modern culture refuses to accept. You don't make good decisions by having perfect information. You make good decisions by having enough information and then having the courage to act on it. Every successful person understands this intuitively. They don't wait for certainty, they act on probability. They don't seek perfect information, they seek sufficient information. They don't try to eliminate all risk, they try to take intelligent risks. The entrepreneur doesn't wait until they're guaranteed success. They start when they have a reasonable chance. The artist doesn't wait until they're certain of their talent. They create and let the work speak. The lover doesn't wait until they're sure the relationship will last forever. They commit and build something meaningful. This is what Kierkegaard meant by the leap of faith. Not the absence of reason, but the recognition that reason has limits. Not the denial of risk, but the acceptance that risk is the price of reward. Not the abandonment of analysis, but the wisdom to know when analysis becomes avoidance. The leap is not reckless. It's the most rational response to an irrational situation. Because the situation, having to choose without certainty, is not going to change. The information will never be complete. The guarantees will never come. The perfect option will never appear. Your choice is not between certainty and uncertainty. Your choice is between uncertainty with action and uncertainty with paralysis. Between the anxiety of choosing and the despair of never choosing. Between the risk of being wrong and the guarantee of being irrelevant. Kierkegaard understood that anxiety is not the enemy of good decisions. Anxiety is the signal that you're facing a decision worth making. If there's no anxiety, there's probably no real choice involved. The goal is not to eliminate anxiety. The goal is to act in spite of it. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in practice. There is a person who has been researching career changes for 3 years. They have read every book, taken every assessment, spoken to professionals in dozens of fields. They have created elaborate spreadsheets comparing salaries, growth potential, work-life balance scores. They know more about career options than most career counselors, but they are still in the same job they hate, making the same complaints, living the same frustrated life. This person believes they are being thorough, but they are actually being cowardly. There is another person who spent 6 months researching relationships, reading dating advice, optimizing their profile, analyzing compatibility algorithms. They can tell you the statistical probability of success for different relationship types. They understand attachment theory, love languages, relationship psychology, but they have never been on a second date. Because no real person can compete with the theoretical perfect partner they've constructed in their mind. This person believes they are being selective, but they are actually being afraid. There is a third person who has been planning to start a business for 5 years. They have read every entrepreneurship book, taken every course, joined every forum. They know more about business theory than many successful entrepreneurs, but they have never sold a single product, never served a single customer, never faced a single real business challenge. This person believes they are being prepared, but they are actually being paralyzed. These are not isolated cases. These are the defining stories of our generation. Millions of people living in the space between decision and action, trapped in the purgatory of eternal preparation. The cruel irony is that all this research doesn't make you more qualified. It makes you more afraid. Every new piece of information reveals new risks you hadn't considered. Every expert opinion introduces new doubts. Every success story highlights your own inaction. You become what psychologists call the perfect student, someone who has mastered the theory of living without ever practicing the art of it. But here's what all the research can't teach you. Competence comes from experience, not analysis. Confidence comes from action, not preparation. Wisdom comes from making mistakes, not avoiding them. The person who changes careers learns about their new field by working in it. The person who finds love learns about relationships by being in them. The person who starts a business learns about entrepreneurship by facing real customers with real problems. No amount of research can substitute for lived experience. No amount of planning can replace real feedback from the real world. No amount of preparation can eliminate the need to begin before you feel ready. This is what Kierkegaard understood about the leap of faith. It's not anti-intellectual, it's recognizing the limits of intellect. It's not abandoning preparation, it's knowing when preparation becomes procrastination. The leap doesn't require you to stop thinking. It requires you to start acting, not despite your uncertainty, but because of it. Because uncertainty is the only honest response to a fundamentally uncertain world. And in that uncertainty lies your freedom, the freedom to choose who you become, the freedom to create meaning through your actions, the freedom to discover who you are by daring to live. But you can't discover any of this from the safety of endless research. You can only discover it by taking the leap. There comes a moment in every person's life when the cost of not choosing becomes greater than the fear of choosing wrong. A moment when staying safe stops feeling safe. When gathering more information starts feeling like gathering more excuses. This is your moment of truth. Not the moment when you finally have enough information. You will never have enough information. Not the moment when you feel completely confident. Confidence comes from action, not analysis. Not the moment when all risk disappears. Risk is the price of being alive. This is the moment when you realize that the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. The leap of faith that Kierkegaard described is not about abandoning reason. It's about recognizing that reason can only take you so far. At some point, you must choose to become someone. And that choice cannot be made from the outside. It can only be made from within. Your authentic life is not hiding in more research. It's not waiting in the perfect plan. It's not guaranteed by the right information. Your authentic life is created by the courage to act on insufficient data, to commit without certainty, to become who you are by daring to choose who you might become. This doesn't mean choosing randomly. It means choosing consciously, based on your values, not other people's success stories. Based on your intuition, not statistical probabilities. Based on who you want to become, not who you're afraid of disappointing. The leap is not about making the perfect choice. It's about making your choice and then having the courage to live with the consequences, to adjust course when needed, to learn from mistakes, to grow through experience. This is how you stop being afraid to live. Not by eliminating fear, but by acting in spite of it. Not by finding certainty, but by embracing uncertainty as the natural condition of human existence. Not by avoiding mistakes, but by making them consciously and learning from them intentionally. Kierkegaard spent his life studying this paradox. The more he analyzed the nature of choice, the more he understood that analysis itself could become a form of avoidance. The more he thought about authentic existence, the more he realized that authenticity could only be achieved through committed action. He wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." This is the leap of faith, not the belief that you will make the right choice, but the recognition that not choosing is also a choice, and usually the worst one. Not the confidence that everything will work out perfectly, but the acceptance that imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. Your life is not a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. And mysteries require participation, not just observation. They require courage, not just intelligence. They require leaps, not just analysis. The question is not whether you're ready to make the perfect decision. The question is whether you're ready to make your decision, to stop researching your life and start living it, to stop preparing for someday and start acting today. If this message resonates with you, tell us in the comments. What choice have you been avoiding? What leap are you afraid to take? And if this made sense to you, keep watching. Because the path from analysis to action doesn't end here. It's just beginning.